Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we are tackling a mystery that I guarantee is going to challenge some things you thought you knew for absolute certain. We're diving into a topic that, honestly, fascinates almost everyone, but is surrounded by so much noise and misinformation. We are talking about the ultimate narcissism mystery. Are narcissists born, or are they made? We've got some groundbreaking, massive-scale research to look at today that completely rewrites the rulebook on where this trait actually comes from. So let's just jump right in. Right off the bat, I want you to think about a question that has dominated pop psychology, countless self-help books, and probably more than a few tense family dinner table conversations over the years. Do parents really create narcissists? Like, if someone grows up to be highly narcissistic, is it automatically their mom or dad's fault? We absolutely love to point the finger at upbringing, don't we? But today, we're going to strip all that away and look at what the hard, cold data actually says. But first, we need to make sure we're completely on the same page. When we talk about narcissism in this explainer, we are moving way beyond the casual insults people just throw around on the internet. According to the actual scientific research we're looking at, narcissism is a specific, measurable personality trait. It's centered on grandiosity, a really strong sense of entitlement, and this relentless striving for social status. And here's the kicker. It's a stable trait, meaning once it's formed, it pretty much sticks around for a person's entire life. Section 1. The parenting myth. The prime suspect in the narcissism mystery. You know, for the longest time, society has essentially operated on this massive, completely untested assumption. And it was largely driven by those old-school psychoanalytic theories. The whole idea was super simple. It's the parents' fault. And there were basically two camps here. The first one, often called the mask model, assumed narcissism is just a compensatory reaction to cold, unloving parenting. Like it's a fragile ego putting up this grandiose shield to protect itself, right? Then you have the other camp, based on learning theories, arguing the exact opposite. They said, no, narcissism happens because parents overly dote on their kids. They overvalue them, put them on a literal pedestal. But here's the massive catch with both of these ideas. They both completely assume that the environment you share with your siblings, meaning your parents' overall general style, is the main thing driving the bus here. Section 2. The Ultimate Twin Test. The German Twin Life Project. So, how do we actually test if any of that is true? Well, you do this. To finally separate the effects of our DNA from the effects of how we're raised, a completely massive scientific effort was launched in Germany. And I mean massive. They didn't just hand out a survey to a couple dozen college freshmen. No way. They examined over 6,700 participants. We're talking over 2,600 twins, plus their mothers, their fathers, their non-twin siblings, and even their spouses. The whole shebang. It's just a monumental, incredibly rigorous data set that spans multiple age groups, from teenagers all the way up to adults. So the really crucial part here is how they actually used these families to get to the truth. And the mechanics are honestly beautifully logical. Step 1, they measured the narcissism levels across all these different family members. Simple enough. But step 2 is where the magic of a twin study really happens. They compared identical twins, who, remember, share 100% of their DNA, against fraternal twins, who only share about 50% of their DNA, exactly like regular siblings. By mapping all these similarities out across the entire extended family tree, scientists essentially built a giant mathematical polygraph test. Because looking at it this way is really the only way to successfully untangle the super complex web of what we inherit biologically versus what we just absorb from our environment. Section 3. Nature versus nurture revealed. The verdict on the parenting myth. Okay, we really need to dive into this data because the breakdown is absolutely wild. After crunching the numbers on thousands of family members, here is what actually creates individual differences in narcissism. 50% of the variance driven by genetics. Our DNA. Okay, so what about the other 50%? That is driven by what they call the non-shared environment, which basically means the totally unique individual life experiences that even identical twins do not share. And what about the shared environment? You know, the general parenting style, the family income, the actual house you grew up in with your siblings? 0. A big, fat, statistical 0. Seriously, let that sink in for a second, because this finding is incredibly profound. It tells us that shared family environments have basically zero effect on creating this specific trait. Growing up in the exact same house with the exact same parents who use the exact same parenting style on you, it does not make siblings similar in their levels of narcissism. If you and your sibling both happen to have high narcissism, the data points directly to the fact that you share genetics, not because your mom or dad treated you both a certain way. Crazy, right? Let's break this down a bit more so we can really understand why siblings can actually turn out so radically different. Your shared environment is just the baseline. It's the same house, the same general household rules, the family's socioeconomic status. But your non-shared environment, that is entirely yours. It's the specific group of friends you make at school, your individual romantic partners, the unique bosses you end up working for, the distinct social circles you navigate. The research completely proves that it's these non-shared, individual paths out in the real world, combined with our DNA, of course, that actually move the needle on our personality. Section 4. The romantic twist. Assortative mating in narcissism. Now, while they were busy untangling this massive web of genetics, the researchers actually stumbled onto a completely fascinating secondary finding. In statistics, this 0.19 positive correlation represents a moderate positive relationship. But in the context of this study, it represents the narcissism levels of the parents themselves. Yep, the researchers found that mothers and fathers in this study actually tended to be really similar to each other in their own levels of narcissism. This is a concept known in biology as assortative mating. So what does that actually mean for human relationships in the real world? Well, it completely shatters another massive pop psychology myth. Because when it comes to this specific trait, opposites absolutely do not attract. There's this huge cultural narrative out there that narcissists are always actively seeking out weak, submissive victims to exploit. But the hard data shows a totally different story. Narcissists actually tend to match and partner up with other narcissists. And honestly, from an evolutionary standpoint, this is wild. Because think about it. If a highly narcissistic person has children with another highly narcissistic person, they are literally doubling down on the genetic transmission of that trait to the next generation. Section 5. A new narcissism paradigm. The real-world impact. So, where does this leave us with everything? We kind of have to rewrite the entire rulebook. If basic parenting is officially off the hook for that remaining 50% of our personality pie, we desperately need to know what actually fills it. Well, the researchers point directly to these highly specific extra-familial factors. This is your non-shared environment in real-time action. It's the educational paths you end up taking and the specific jobs you hold. It's your actual position within your social networks. Like, are you the leader of your peer group? Do you have romantic relationships that constantly validate a grandiose self-image? The absolute key driver here seems to be repeated, status-related rewards out in the wild. When someone gets a major status boost, say a big promotion at work or a massive spike in popularity at school, how does their environment reinforce that? Because that, right there, is where the environmental half of narcissism is truly forged. Ultimately, all of this data builds into a surprisingly clear equation. The brand new scientific paradigm of narcissism looks exactly like this. A genetic disposition, which is essentially just a biological sensitivity or like a reactivity to rewards and status, combined with your completely individual, highly specific life experiences out in the world, equals your narcissism trajectory. It is a totally dynamic, synergistic interplay. You might be born with the genetic software that really craves social status, but it's the unique peer groups and workplaces you navigate that determine how that software actually runs and updates over the course of your lifetime. Which brings us to a really profound final thought. We started all this by asking if parents are to blame, and we found out that a shared home environment plays effectively zero role. We discovered that half of this super complex trait is hardwired into our genetics, and the other half is forged by the entirely unpredictable individual paths we walk out in the real world. So I'm going to leave you with this to chew on. If our DNA and the completely unique, unshared events of our individual lives are what truly write our story, how much control do we really have over who we become? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it leaves you looking at human nature and maybe even your own siblings in a whole new light.